Okay, welcome to the December 4th meeting of the Village Planning Commission, our monthly meeting. My name is Paul Travis. I'm the new chair of the commission. C-Mac Sammy, who was an extraordinary chairman of this commission for many years, has left. And we have three items we want to discuss tonight. One is the application of the Village Latch-In for change of zone. Second is request for adding a new special exception use for North Sea Road. And third, talk a little bit about our January agenda. So let's start by talking about the application of the Village Latch-In for a change of zone. Make some general comments first and then open the floor to the members of the commission.
Well, I'd like to make a comment,
right.
Since that's always been hotel space
Right.
from before the turn of the century. I remember reading that Irving Terry owned a farm on the North Shore, and he bought that hotel from, I forgot the other part he bought it from, and he operated that thing until he died. And it's always been hotel space, that whole area up there. And I think it should go back that way.
Right, and I think that's our general sense, that this is an existing use that has been in place for many, many years. Actually, probably predates the zoning in the village. That's my guess. And the other thing is, it is consistent with the village master plan. So I think we're all in favor of the change of zone. I think we want to talk a little bit tonight about what we would like to see happen when the zone is changed, and then talk about next steps. So, Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about some of your points?
Yes. Okay, let me just get the right glasses. So, yeah, as you said, I think I agree that a zone change or something should be done to leave the non-conforming use is not the right way. And however, I think that if we're going to go through with a change of use, a change of zone, I think that it should be for the entire area, not just for that particular property. It should also encompass the Southampton Inn and whatever. It should be for an area, not a property. I thought also that in terms of environmental impact studies, something should be provided by the applicant or the applicants or whoever makes the formal application in support of it. I think that the village would entertain also doing our own study, but I think that there should be something more comprehensive provided by the applicant. And in my view, I think that one of the alternatives to the change of zone to a hotel zone would be to incorporate this area into the village business district and then amend the regulation for the village business district to incorporate a section for hotels or transient use. That's really not that well specified, but incorporate into the village use, in the village business district. And I would add a provision that, for any and that such hotel and motel should connect to any wastewater pollution control plant that would be built for the village business district. That should be part of it. In terms of the master plan, the master plan, I mean, Paul, what he's saying, it's consistent with the master plan. I'm not so sure that I agree there that the master plan is 25 years old.
Right.
I'm not sure whether the points that are brought there are really valid anymore, but I agree that in general, it makes sense. And then the last point was that I thought that in terms of the village latch in particular, that they should keep in mind that when we do the zone change, it's as if obtaining a new certificate of occupancy because you're changing the zone, so you'll be getting a new certificate of occupancy. So then they will no longer be grandfathered on all of the, many of the violations that they have.
Right.
So they're going to have to bring the facility back into compliance with applicable codes and zone for that zone.
Right. So let me add a few things. One is, I think one of the things we're thinking of is that a hotel that we need to amend and update the hotel motel zone. It really hasn't been looked at in a long time. It seems to us pretty outdated, so we want to look at the density that is permitted in that zone, the parking regulations of that zone, the setbacks, and make sure they all still make sense. We also know that many of the trustees have expressed concerns about timeshares. And in the village center master plan, we actually put in a provision that timeshares were not permitted in a hotel. So we need to deal with that issue, certainly. I guess for myself, and then hopefully more comments. My thought would be that an alternative to including it in the business district is to leave it in the current zone, because if the hotel in the future is not economically viable, the issue is what use would we want it to be replaced by. And in the current zone, if the hotel use were not viable, it would go back to a residential use, which would be feasible on those sides. So that's something I think we need to think about.
There's one thing I want to mention, is that I think we have height restrictions. I think we should specify maximum 3 stories. Don't even, I don't want to see a 5-story building like they built in Riverhead.
Right.
But I think that in terms of, I think it was always been a hotel. I think there is a need for a hotel. It's been there. I think that the village business district, is good.
Yeah, but I don't want them coming back to the village years down the line. We want to build a 6-story or 8-story building here.
No, we have height restrictions.
Yeah, but I wanted that specifically specified, that don't even bother coming to ask us.
Right.
Well, they can come and ask, but we already have the restrictions.
Right.
The restrictions there.
Right. So I think the next step would be, we would refer this to Chick Voorhees to do a study.
But I think before, maybe, I thought we were going to speak to DePetris.
Right, no, and I say, and the other thing is have Rick DePetris start working on a draft.
Or also look at what are the alternatives.
Right,
What are
correct.
the alternatives from the zone change incorporated
Right,
village business
right.
district? Look at the motels.
Right.
What are the actual?
Right.
Although I kind of agree too, I don't think we should mess around with the business district master plan that we just did. I keep them separate. I think that's a better idea, and do the overlay or change the zoning.
Or an overlay, yes. Or it could be with an overlay.
Yeah,
Right.
Could
and,
be village business district.
and as far as the grandfathering, I mean, unless they rebuild structures, I don't think we should be asking them to.
No,
to
but when you
correct all
change a
the-
zone, you have to get a new certificate of occupancy. And when you get the new certificate of occupancy, it triggers.
This property's been there a long time. It could be a major,
All right, I know,
major
but
endeavor.
you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't be
can do that?
grandfather.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
What happens to prior nonconformity?
well, it depends on what it is. I mean, certainly if I think let's sort of separate. So you would have number one, let's say, for example, that we change the zone and we require certain setbacks, but the existing building doesn't conform.
Right.
That building could stay, but if it
Right.
were replaced, it would have to
Well,
conform.
that's what I said.
But if there were, for example, a
Variance.
fire code violation or something of
Okay.
that sort, it would have to be
Yeah,
addressed.
right, of course.
Right, right.
There's one more thing. There's 2 historic buildings on our property, and I think this property with these 2 buildings should be included in the historic district.
Right, right,
They are. I'm sorry to interrupt you. They already are.
great, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those buildings are not getting.
Right, these are the 2 buildings basically on Hill
The
Street.
2 white ones.
Right,
yeah.
They call them the Terry
Right.
Cottage with the
Right,
latch.
right, right.
Okay.
I have some comments.
That'd be great.
response,
Yep,
if
yep.
you're ready.
Yep,
Okay.
we're ready.
Up there closer because the
Right.
studio was only up in the front.
Right.
Yep.
Appreciate that,
No
thank you.
problem.
That's good.
So, as far as including the Southampton Inn, I mean, that's
Right.
not something we can speak to. We did, I think I might have told you the last time that I was here, that we did sort of invite them to participate,
Right.
and they declined, so. As far as, I guess my question is,
But if I can just
Yes.
add one step, I think that it would behoove to maybe try again and try to, speak to them again, because it's very difficult
And we will
Would that just be up
also,
to us?
we will also, because
Yeah.
we really want to look at it as an area, obviously, not
Okay.
just as
Not
one
just
property.
take one property, want to
Right.
take, because it was all hotel area, both those
Right.
pieces before they got separated. It's just one hotel
I
area.
mean, they would not have a say anyway if we decide
No.
to make it, so.
No. But we will reach out to them
I think
again.
that retail use is a prohibited use in the hotel zone.
Correct.
That's maybe why they don't want to be involved.
It's possible, it's possible.
Well, Can make an
Yeah.
exception there.
We will certainly talk to them.
Thank you, okay.
Excuse me, do
yes.
they own the property across Viridian Way?
Think
Yes.
so?
So that was the old Gilmartin Dairy there.
There's no
Yeah, but
dairy
they
anymore.
own that, they own all the way,
Okay, to your building, or,
Yeah.
yeah. Because that was the Gilmartin Dairy back in there.
right.
There was a big house in front, there was a dairy processing, used to process milk and stuff back there.
Okay, now as far as environmental review, I think there should be some kind of coordination between you and the Board of Trustees.
Yeah, I think what we'll do honestly is we'll talk to the trustees, and my guess is they'll want us to hire, or I should say the village to hire, the environmental review firm, and then we'll talk about how that gets paid for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because at the last public hearing, this has been sort of going on, public
Right,
hearing after public
right,
hearing,
right.
And we're gonna come back, I think, on the 12th to the
Right.
Board of Trustees.
Right.
There had been some comments from an attorney for Whitefield, Eric Bregman, we're raising some environmental issues, and, we're aware that additional environmental
Right.
review obviously is going to have to be done. But it doesn't really make sense to do one review for you and one review for the
Correct.
Board of Trustees,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
have the same consultant, so
Right.
I think it should be all done simultaneously. So, I don't know how that happens, but I guess you'll talk to the Board of Trustees.
We'll talk to the trustees, and I'm sure they're gonna, I agree with you, I think they're gonna want to have one environmental firm hired by the village look at the zone.
Right.
But I think they should review their stuff.
Yeah, no, right, of course,
Right,
they
and
should,
then-
InterScience
You
do,
should
right?
prepare one.
Right.
Are you preparing one?
You mean
No, Mark, I think the way the trustees generally like to do this is the village would prepare the environmental statement, and they'll review what the work they've done through InterScience.
Right.
But I think they're gonna want, where there's covers more than one property, I think they're gonna want us to, be responsible, making sure the environmental study gets done.
Yeah, and if, the environmental, part of what and I actually had a conversation with Rich Warren about this
Uh-huh.
this afternoon,
Right?
we'd like to try to focus what the areas of interest are, traffic, obviously, I think traffic is probably going to be one of them, that's already come up several times at the Board of Trustees.
Right.
But, rather than having an unknown universe of the environmental issues, I think at this point, it would be good if the village's consultant could sort of lay out the areas of concern that he thinks, are important, and then we can provide more information on that.
Right, I think as part of that, as Mark was alluding to, we need to work with Rick to figure out what we want to include in the new zone in
Okay.
terms of regulations, because that's obviously gonna have a big impact on what the environmental study looks at.
Okay.
I think density is one thing that we know, again, one thing that's helpful here, I think, is that, because we just, looked at this issue in the context of the Village Center Master Plan, we have some, I think, sense of the issues both the public and trustees were concerned about. Those were density, they were traffic, certainly. There's obviously an issue of,
Wastewater.
wastewater is a major issue here. And then, setbacks, height, those were all issues that came up. And as I said, the last issue that really is more of a legal issue than an environmental issue, but is an issue that some of the trustees had real concerns about, is not opening the door for timeshares in the hotel zone. So those are all issues we need to look at.
Okay. I just want to say a couple more things. Let me talk about that, like the specifics of the actual regulations in the motel district.
Right.
Now, I'm sure, as you know, it's 1 unit per 3,000 square feet. And my understanding was when the village did its updating of the village center master plan, that it retained that density.
Correct.
And, I certainly don't think any lesser density would be
Okay.
appropriate. Additional density would be welcomed, obviously.
Right.
And it goes to to making this sort of a viable operation economically.
Mhm.
You know, there's a certain number of rooms.
Right.
A lot of people have looked at the property, a lot of people who do this type of development, you know, as a living, and the current room count of 76 rooms, which is one, you know, that's a two-person rooms, two-person units. 76 is what you get by, you know, dividing the square footage by 3,000. That's sort of not really a lot.
Right.
You know, I think that if you could consider that, that would be, you know, definitely appreciated. And you know, the property is 5 acres, and it
Mhm.
can be, you know, there's the capacity for doing substantial screening, substantial setbacks.
Right, right.
As you know, there's already, we have a feasibility study that says that a sewage treatment plant is feasible there.
Right.
That was done by Paul
Right,
Grosser.
right.
And, you know, so all of those things, I can't really comment on the specific parking issues, but as far as the alternative of changing it to the village business district, you know, that would also be welcome. I mean,
Right.
that's obviously, probably even gives more options for the property. And so that is fine, but the reason that we had thought that it wasn't really an option and didn't make that application is because when it's been done, when you redid the village business district regulations, you said no hotels in historic zones, so
Right,
obviously that's a
right, correct.
contradiction.
Correct.
That would have to be resolved for this
Right,
property at
That's
least.
correct. I'm also concerned, honestly, and again, we'll have to study this issue and think about it.
Yeah, but those historic built, that was always a hotel.
Right, so
It was
it's, I
built
mean,
as a
it wouldn't, it
hotel.
doesn't make sense.
Well, it
Yeah.
made sense in the village center, it doesn't make
Yes,
sense here, but
correct.
the other thing that I think we'd have to look at is, as you noted, there was some concern by the adjacent,
Whitefield,
right,
Yeah.
adjacent residents, and I think changing that property to village business district, they might have some concerns about, so
yeah,
so we'll
I
need to
can
look at those
imagine.
items.
Yeah,
But
okay.
the 76 rooms, though, is a substantial
Yeah.
facility. I mean, when you look at what they did in Bridgewater, in
Bridgehampton,
Bridgehampton,
right.
how many rooms there, like 12 or 15?
No,
They have
they're built,
22.
yeah,
How
yeah.
many?
I read
22.
22.
Yeah, I think it's 22, because they built more.
Oh, 20.
Yeah.
Is that the old Bull's Head Inn?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah,
correct,
okay.
yeah, right. It was a very nice job.
Can you imagine?
As far as the question of the master plan being 25 years old, it's actually in the year 2000 master plan that this
Right,
is recommended.
right.
But you're right, there is that study from 1991, and that
Right,
is
right.
definitely old.
Right, the 2000
Um,
master plan definitely talks about hotel zone here.
Well, it reviewed the 1991 motel study
Right.
and said it agreed with its
Right,
conclusions and reiterated its recommendations. So, as far as getting a new CO, I'm not aware that that's a requirement for a change of zone. I mean, I haven't really studied
Right,
that
right.
issue closely, but.
I mean, that's something we'll talk about with the village attorney.
Okay. And as far, you know, I have spoken to the owners, and the building inspector does go in there regularly, and they have been inspected for.
We're well aware.
Okay, all right, good.
One of his favorite trips.
We'll just leave that one alone.
Right, okay. At timeshares, I mean, honestly, I've actually researched this issue from a legal standpoint, and I'm not convinced that it's even legal to eliminate timeshare, the timeshare possibility, because it goes to the question of ownership, whereas zoning is supposed to is to regulate use. So the question is there a different use resulting from timeshares? And I'm not really convinced that that's the case. So, you know, I'd like to just put that out there. I'm not gonna, you know, we're not at the point of arguing about it, but, you know, maybe you could bring that up with
I think when other municipalities have regulated about timeshares, which they have, the way they look at it is that a timeshare is a longer period of occupancy than is typical in a hotel.
Okay,
So that's the way they've looked at it. But again, that's something we'll talk about with the village attorney. The only reason I bring it up is because the trustees, when we were finishing up the master plan and the zoning and design guidelines for the village center, there was tremendous concern when we permitted hotels in the Windmill Lane area, that we not open the door for timeshare. So it's an issue we're just gonna have to talk about,
Okay.
because it will come up, I'm sure, before this moves to some action.
Paul, just not to
Right.
throw a monkey wrench
Right.
in this, but reading the history of Southampton Hospital, there were wealthy people that used to rent a room out
Right.
in the hospital, have their own staff, and they would be in the hospital. And I think, but I'm not 100% sure, but I think the Irving Hotel did the same thing.
Right.
People would rent 2 or 3 rooms out for the
Right.
summer.
Or for a season,
Right, right,
yeah,
right.
I think you're right, I don't think
And,
that's
and they had
unusual.
that, and so,
And I think that that actually could be a scenario for this property if, you know,
Mhm.
if it's developed, you know, into a very high standard in the
Right,
future, so.
right.
Not sure that you do wanna prohibit that, but you can obviously,
Right.
this is just the beginning of that discussion. As far as like the timing of, you know, obviously, you know, I know that this is a major application and then the boards are gonna take their time with it, but, you know, the sooner that you can
Right,
coordinate
right.
with the
Yep,
Board of Trustees, it would be
right,
greatly appreciated, because
Okay.
we've already had, I think, 3 hearings
Right,
before
right,
them,
yes.
so we'd like to sort of tie things up. We know there's gonna be a secret process, but we'd like to
Right.
get that started.
Right.
And see where we go.
okay.
And I thank you for your
Thanks.
Okay.
positive
Thank you.
comments.
Any other comments, thoughts?
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, our next topic is North Sea Road. So, there was this discussion at our last meeting, we do have copies here, by the way, about a proposal to amend the zoning code to create a special exception overlay zone for retail sales along North Sea Road. And in that conversation, it was noted that the current office district zoning creates difficulties because of lack of demand for office space, and also that there were pre-existing retail uses in that area. This is, I would start out by saying, and then let's open it up and talk about it. This is a proposal we have really struggled with. There are a lot of concerns, I think, about the right approach for North Sea Road. We just certainly note that there is an economic difficulty currently on North Sea Road, and so we're certainly cognizant of that. I want to sort of note the issues that we find difficult, and then talk about some things we had thought about, and then let's open this for a wider conversation. So I guess a few things. Number one is, just note, unlike the last application we discussed, this is not consistent with the master plan, which very clearly talks about the interest in the residents of the village in focusing retail development in the village center. It is a heavily trafficked corridor. There are existing traffic conflicts, and residential zones are immediately adjacent. So we're concerned about traffic here. And, I think, as was clear from the last meeting, the thing where we have most trouble with is that the Planning Commission, over an 8-year period, went through a very major effort to implement the Village Center master plan. That plan calls for, in its intro, focusing retail development in the heart of the village. We have 2 streets in the village center, Nugent and Windmill Lane, which are both have very significant vacancy rates, and a lot of turnover still, not as bad as it was a few years ago, but a lot of turnover both on Job's Lane and Main Street. We are hopeful that the recent opening of Pottery Barn in the old Saks Fifth Avenue space and the opening soon of Citarella on Hampton Road will provide an opportunity to begin to address those vacancies and encourage improvement to the village center, and encourage retailers to want to operate adjacent to those retailers. You begin to see that happening on Hampton Road, which clearly has a higher, is looking better than it has in a long time. And we're hopeful that impact will spill over onto Nugent Street and Windmill Lane. And all of that leads us to say we want to be very cautious in how we move ahead. So we have some thoughts. I want to open it up for everybody to talk. I'm not sure we're ready to come to an answer tonight, but this is something we really want to talk about. So, number one.
I don't hope you don't have an answer.
Right. I know. I figured that. So number one, and I think we in fairness should not have an answer tonight. So number one, I think there is reasonable consensus for us on permitting retail north of the railroad embankment. I think the reasons are, number one, that is a area that is mostly retail or high-density commercial currently. The road is very wide there. There's certainly room on that part of the road. And we think from a planning point of view, you can make a reasonable argument. It makes sense there. South of the railroad embankment, I think we're very torn. There's many different opinions on this group, I would say. I think two things that we think certainly could work there, and both of these are obviously subject to the Suffolk County Health Department, are multi-family uses, which we think certainly could work there and would fit in with the neighbors around it. And we think restaurant uses certainly could work in that area. I think on retail, and I will note that we've certainly split on this issue. I think the concern that we have is that we've just implemented the Village Center Master Plan and the new zoning, and I think there's some thought that it needs time to really have its impact. And I would say on a personal level, I'm very nervous about beginning to create real competition for the vacant buildings on Wimmel and Nugent Lane, and would feel much better about approaching the retail on this street if those buildings were not currently vacant. So with that, if members of the commission want to add anything?
Well,
Yeah.
we've beat this thing around quite a bit, and one of the things that was talked about is the cutoff line. We're talking about the railway trestle, and it was suggested from Prospect Street north is wide enough. Then it was talked about if we do change the zoning in that area, that the owners would have to give up land on either side so the road could be widened to accept the increase up to Bowden Square. That was one concept. The other thing we talked about is like affordable housing in that area, which the village could really use. And that's probably, you could probably get a considerable amount of affordable housing in that area. The other thing was felt with our discussion is that in the expansion of the village business district or going out their retail space, North Sea Road is a preferable direction that we feel that the expansion should take place, but we're also concerned about taking care of our downtown area, making sure that that's vibrant before we allow it to go up North Sea Road. And I think that, anybody else have anything else to
Right, very well said. And just to go to your last point, I think one thing we do acknowledge is that in the long run, and I think the issue is when, this is a better place for
Yes.
expansion than either Hampton Road or Hill Street. I think that's a pretty convincing argument. I think the issue for us is much more whether or not this is the time to make that expand.
No, I agree with those points. The one I would like to add is that also it's a little difficult to and we understand that something should be done around North Sea Road, but for us to take an action to rezone this area, or modify the zoning to this area without any concrete proposal, without any, there is nothing in front of us that, I think it's making a decision to do it in a vacuum. And if that proposal to suddenly, it's like putting the cart before the horse, the way I see it.
Right.
And suddenly there would be consolidation of some of the properties. We don't know exactly how would it impact the existing uses of that are there. But I agree that north of the railroad, definitely, retail should be allowed there.
Well, I think I'm the only dissenting opinion here. Because I I feel that that corridor already has retail on it, and the traffic isn't terrible except in the summertime. But obviously, there can be a traffic study, it can be addressed and see what can be done to improve it. But I also think that that area would lend itself to a different type of retail than the retail that we have in the center of the village. And not only would it be a different retail that I don't think would detract from business that wants to be on Main Street and wants to be really in the center, that's more retail that you walk to versus driving to. But we also need to do something for that portion of a road coming into the village to make it more vibrant, more acceptable. And if we don't do it now, I think another 10, 20 years will go by because before it gets tackled again or anybody wants to, or we're going to wait to see what happens with the center of the village, it's never going to happen. So I think that we should really address it. There should be a way that we can allow for further development in that area without the detracting from business in the center village. As far as approving north and not south, I think we should look at this as one area, not to give preference to one section and not the other section. It's not going to be fair to the people that are south of the railroad tracks versus the ones that north that get preference. So, in my opinion, it should be handled as one area and not two different areas. So that's where I stand.
I think that the topography is, there are two
It's only
areas.
the road. It's only
No,
the
but
road.
there is a break at the railroad, and that break is going to be there. I don't think the railroad is going to widen the bridge for any time soon. So there is a two.
They have widened the bridge
have
and
done.
raised it.
The
Yes,
bridge is
exactly.
actually as wide as the road
Right, so
that
it's as wide as
precedes
it
it.
can be. So it's
So, no, it's already pretty wide. I mean, it's as wide as the road that comes into it.
No,
Then
no.
it narrows
it's
a little
not.
bit coming
No, no,
in.
no,
It's not. It's actually less, I drove that today. It's actually less wide than the road to the north.
I've been going
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not about.
No, it's not narrow, but it sort of goes in a bit. Right.
Yeah, just a
right,
bit. I mean, it's
Right.
not.
You lose a
really
lane.
bottleneck.
Right, right,
you lose the lane.
right.
And
Yeah.
you do have the 3 lanes going south. You have the 2 lanes and you have the turn lane. So, I mean, it's not,
After the bridge.
it's not, yeah, after the bridge. It's not like you only have 2 lanes and if somebody tries to turn, you're gonna block all the traffic. You do have a turn lane as well. You have the 2 lights on both sides, which means
Right.
when the light gets red, cars go by and you can turn without having, creating congestion. It's not that terrible.
But certainly you know in the summer that
In the
that
summer it gets
section of
bad.
road is more complex than any other place in the village.
Yes.
It is the
Well,
most
no,
difficult
no,
part
you
of the
look at Hill
village.
Street. You try coming down Hill Street in the summertime. So what are you gonna do? You're gonna eliminate retail on Hill Street? Hill Street is backed up all the way, it's incredible, all the way to,
But that's about a turn, it's not conflict within the road itself. That's about the turn.
Excuse
The
me?
light for the turn. That's
Yeah,
the
but
backup.
Hill Street gets backed up
Oh, yeah.
way
Yeah,
down.
but that's really about the light for the turn. I
Yeah,
mean, that's
so
what the
I
traffic
think
studies show.
it's worse than North Sea Road in the summertime.
Right, but again, that's about a turn. That's, seriously, that's what, because we did a traffic study. That backs up because there's so many cars making that turn there, that it backs all the way up. And it backs up, obviously, on Woodmill, and it backs up on it. The problem on North Sea Road is you have things across the street from each other, and a lot of conflict with people going in and out. So, in the summer, look, we've all seen it, there's accidents on that road. I mean, that section of road has difficulties. That's not a reason not to rezone. I mean, it means, you have to look at the traffic.
You just have to work it out.
But there obviously are traffic issues there, so. Other comments?
And,
Yeah, sorry.
what about widening the road there, in that one section?
You know, I went down the road, I'm not sure they have space to do that.
No.
Yeah,
Difficult to do.
I'm not too sure you have space to do it, maybe a little bit, but I don't think that would resolve the issue.
Right.
I mean, just making it a little bit wider, what are you gonna put, 4 lanes? I mean, what are you gonna do? You're not really gonna resolve anything.
Yeah, but you'd almost need a turning lane in the center.
Well, you have a turning lane, you do have it in the middle.
Right, I mean, but you realize how physically different it is from the other retail streets? So you don't have parking on the street.
No.
You don't have, and that's both good and bad, but it's a completely different street.
Oh,
You don't have
You
parking.
have to have parking. and-
Yeah, I mean, it's physically is not, I mean, my own, just as a planner for a second, which is what my studies are.
I don't have your expertise on
I
that.
just don't, this is not a natural retail street. There are retail uses on it, but it is problematic. It has housing adjacent to it, right adjacent, not somewhat adjacent, immediately adjacent. In fact, some on the street, but just right adjacent. It's not set up for retail, it doesn't have parking. It is the major entrance into the village, so there's a conflict with cars going through. So I have a lot of concerns about it. I'm not saying we absolutely can't do it, but it is not a street that jumps out at me. And
Right.
if you look at Windmill Lane, it should be a retail street. It's set up to be a retail street, it physically has the requirements for a retail street. Same thing with Nugent Street. The post office is vacant right now, the old post office. There's, we can list the vacancies on those two streets. Those properties, I believe, are directly competitive with the properties on North Sea Road. There's no substantive difference between the two. And so if you're a retailer, so the problem I keep coming back to
There
is,
is a substantive difference.
tell me what that is.
Difference, you talk about parking, you can park. on
They
the
all
street
have their
if you
own
want,
parking lots.
But you can also park on the street,
Right.
and it's walking distance.
Right, but what I'm
to the center
saying
of
is
the
if you're a
village.
retailer,
So, I mean, the type of retail you're gonna have there is the retail that you can walk to. You park in the center, you walk to it. On North Sea Road, you gotta drive to it, you're not gonna walk to it.
but
It's
just
a
let me
different type of retail.
use an example. I'm not saying they're gonna do this, and this is my ultimate concern. So let's say CVS, or let's use a big example, we're Rite Aid, right? Which is now on Nugent Street.
Right.
And let's say they could move to Windmill Lane, right? I'm sorry, to North Sea Road, I apologize.
Right.
Would that have an impact on foot traffic and demand in the village? Absolutely, absolutely. And so the concern I keep coming back to is, are we ready on streets that are already fairly weak from a retail point of view to provide what I think is a very strong competitor to those streets?
Yeah, although I'm
That's
not,
my concern.
although I'm not too sure about that, because at CVS, people don't walk to CVS. You
I
drive
agree
to-
with you. What I'm
drive to
saying is,
CVS.
the separation we're making, but that's my point. The
Once you
separation
are
we're
there,
making.
Once you're at CVS
Right.
or Rite Aid, and you walk, you're.
Right.
Not really.
But no,
CVS,
but
you
no, I'm
drive
agreeing
away.
with you, Eduardo. What I'm saying is the separation we're making, which is the retailers on North Sea Road will be retailers you drive to, and the retailers in the village are retailers you walk to.
Right.
That doesn't exist. In fact, CVS, I agree with you, most people drive to. So if you take that out of the village, I think it has real impact. It has real impact, and that's my ultimate concern. Now, if the street were fully
What
occupied,
kind of impact exactly? Apart from a vacancy, then somebody else moves in. What kind of impact?
you're
would it have?
taking shoppers out of the village.
Well, I
They're
mean,
spending less
if-
time in the
if
village.
somebody moves out of CVS, somebody else will come in and maybe be somebody that people
But that's
actually
not
want.
the history. That's not the recent history. The recent history is we have increasing vacancies on those two streets. So I guess what I
Oh,
keep
you're
coming.
assuming that if there's a vacancy, then nobody else will come.
No,
in.
no, I'm not. What I'm saying is I'm thinking and hoping that the Village Center master plan with the new zoning and design guidelines and the new
I mean, we
parking
hope that'll
rules.
be completely redeveloped.
Correct,
We hope it'll look like Main Street one day.
correct. And the
So
question,
it'll be, again, even a different type of
correct.
retail.
And so I guess it's a timing
So
issue.
we want CVS to go out on North Sea Road.
No. What I'm saying is from a timing point of view, but again, that's not actually what it says in the zoning. What it says in the zoning is what the master plan actually for the Village Center says is we want to encourage anchor tenants in the village.
Yes.
Because the anchor, and that's really what Robert Gibbs was saying, by the way.
Yes.
You need anchor tenants because if you don't go to the village every day to do your normal everyday shopping, you won't come for the other shopping.
Yes.
And that's the rule, whether you're Greenwich or Southampton or Palm Beach or Skinny Hills, New York, it makes no difference. Basic rule of retail. That's why every shopping center in America wants a supermarket, because you go every day.
Right.
Right? I mean, why do people want supermarkets and shopping centers, which I build for a living? Because that's the daily shopping.
Correct.
So my concern is, when we have streets that have such high vacancy rates, do we want to open another street? And so it's really, for me, more a timing issue. And then there's planning issues that need to be resolved. But I still concerned about, just from a timing point of view.
I mean, how many new retail spaces would pop up on North Sea Road if we allowed it? We're talking about 10 different retail spaces, 2 retail spaces, 3 retail spaces,
Well, first of all, it's hard to know.
in addition to what is already there.
Well,
But that, I think.
Well, there's only
I-
one, by
I
the
think-
way,
I
can
think
I be
there's only-
clear?
only
If-
2, 3
In
locations.
the area, I think we're all concerned about, there's one traditional retail use. It's called Schmidt's. There's a garden center that people would argue is retail, but actually is treated differently.
But it's like retail, people go in
But
and
no,
out,
but
in
let
and
me
out.
just talk from a zoning point of view. You have a garden center, you have a post office, which is a government entity.
Right.
You have one retail use in
Yeah,
that district.
but the type of movement is like retail.
I'm not arguing, but just from a zoning point of view, you have
I
one
understand,
retail
but
use.
in reality, it's like retail. And you have a restaurant, on Bowden Square.
Right.
That's like retail too,
right,
people coming and going, coming
Right.
and going. So once you take those quasi-retail spaces, what else is there left to
Well,
develop?
the difference would be take
You have
Lynch's.
200,
No, take Lynch's, take the post office, take the buildings obviously to the south. I'm not saying this is good or bad. Take the building to the north of Schmitz, the buildings to the north of Schmitz, take the lot to the south of there. All of that is potentially retail space if you change the
Well,
special
it
exception use.
already is retail space.
No, most of those are
It's
not.
like retail use. It's like retail use.
Collective.
But that's
And this-
different.
this addresses-
But
this
the
is-
zoning recognizes there's a difference between the two. In
Okay.
intensity of use.
These are all grandfathered, right? They're not offices.
No, but
They're not offices.
the government institution would be allowed to be office size.
Yeah, okay, but
Right.
they're not offices.
Garden center is permitted.
Or it is
Right,
permitted.
yeah.
All
So,
right.
I guess what I'm
Restaurant
saying is,
permitted?
no,
Restaurant is-
restaurants
okay,
are not
Restaurants not
permitted.
permitted. Schmitz is permitted?
Schmitz is a pre-existing use.
Right, it's not
Right.
permitted. It's
Right,
pre-existing.
correct.
So we have a lot of pre-existing uses
Right.
that are already working like retail.
But let me
Even-
use the obvious example. Do we want a supermarket there? Because that's the example. Because these are big enough lots to permit it. That's the good news is, they're big enough lots.
You can, if you don't want a supermarket, you can say so.
No, but these are the things we need to think about.
All right, I
So,
understand. That is,
Right.
before we say that we're not gonna allow retail use,
Right.
we may want to make certain restrictions. You don't want a supermarket, we won't allow a supermarket. You don't want a 50,000 square foot store, we won't allow over 10,000 square feet,
Right.
argument's sake.
Right.
So we can put in regulations
Right.
that will protect the village and the center so
Right.
that not too much
Right.
business will be diverted.
right,
But in practicality as well, once you look at the uses that are presently there that are either non-conforming or government, okay? What else is left to develop is only maybe a couple of lots, which is
I don't agree.
200,
I don't agree.
no?
I don't agree. I mean, I'm not,
Well,
we
which ones are they?
disagree on that.
Right.
I think the
Which
entire
I think
frontage, yeah, Yeah.
If I can,
Yeah.
I think that there is a lack of definition
right,
in terms of
right.
what should be done. I think that
Right.
if there was a better plan that was presented to us to say, well, then at that point, there would be something to review that.
Well, maybe we should do
Mark.
the plan.
I mean, I think the
Can I say
idea,
something? Mark,
Yeah.
I'm here to get that plan from the planning commission.
Right.
Right, I just said
right.
we should be doing
Right.
the
I
plan.
am not an
Right.
expert in this. I'm
Right.
here to tell
That's
you
very
to
fair.
do that.
right,
Right.
and that's fair, that's absolutely
That's
fair.
why I'm here.
Right. Now, I mean, just one thing that I think listening to all this is, the idea, which was a perfectly good idea, was make it a special exception use.
Right.
I think we're all very comfortable with that. That's clear, that if we're gonna do anything here, we wanna do it with real rules and,
Right,
and we wanna be straightforward about it. We don't wanna leave it to the planning board or someone else to decide on an
Right.
item-by-item basis,
Right,
right?
right.
That I think we all agree.
Yeah,
If we're gonna
it
do
would have
something
to be
here,
something that
we would
covers
do,
the whole
right,
area,
right,
yes.
right.
Yes.
And we would do a real plan, we
So
would
we don't
not
have a
just.
mishmash and who
Right.
knows what.
Right. So let me say what I think we all agree on. There's traffic issues that need to be addressed. We need to, I think we all, basically, Mark, agree with you, we need to sort of look at this corridor in a comprehensive way and come up with a plan for it. And, you know, if we do permit retail, we would have to address what type of retail and what density of retail. So I think, so that's, I think, things we agree on. You know, one approach might be that we do what we do in the village center and hire a planner to take a look at the street and come back to us.
That's a good idea.
And maybe that's the next step, so that we, because I think,
And they can give recommendations,
Right,
whether
right.
it's feasible or not.
right, and
whether-
what it would mean
Right,
and
of
what the
course.
traffic requirement, parking and all that. So that's one thing we could think about maybe doing as a next step.
And I think that's important, because, again, I think coming into the village, that road is almost an eyesore.
I think we all agree,
And-
yes,
and-
yes.
And if we can do something that will
Right.
not only benefit the owners, but will
Right.
benefit the village as well,
Right.
it behooves us to make that investment in time and
Right.
money to come up with something.
Right, right. So does that make sense to everyone? Do you have comments, I presume, or
I do,
thoughts?
sir, I do, sir.
Right, okay.
And forgive my voice this evening, I can't speak long.
I'm sorry about the
Well,
lack of
thank
heat.
God.
I'd first of all like to thank you for your help and assistance
Right.
with this. I do agree that it's, there are several issues involved here. And let me go back, enter this backwards, and again, to Mark's issue. I'm here to say basically that the 40 years that this has been an office district has not worked. It's not working now, and the future office use is even less attractive than it has been in the present or the past. So I've come here to say there's something wrong with this. Let's put our heads together as the Planning Commission and some private citizens to try and develop something along this road that is more viable than what is there now. To your comment, Paul, unfortunately our zoning code, the way it is, doesn't distinguish the subtleties that you and Eduardo get into.
Right.
And somebody can argue that Lynch's isn't retail, it's something else, but unfortunately, under our code, I don't see any other category that it fits in other than retail store, and that's what the code says. To give you a couple of, Lynch's is not a wholesale business, it's not a nursery. They're selling retail products there, you go buy something and carry it out. It happens to be green and with roots, but it's still a retail product. And if you look at the categories we have, which, sadly to say for a zoning code this old are just not adequate, bank, boatyard, drive-in eating facility, funeral home, greenhouse, hotel, marina, theater, indoor, outdoor theater, nightclub, office professional, office personal, repair shop, restaurant, retail. So, not to be funny, there's a great Clint Eastwood movie, and part of the movie, they're in a cemetery, and there's a question of who's going to dig the grave. And Clint Eastwood has the gun, and he says to the other guy, there are two people in this kind of world, those that have guns and those that dig. So you can look at retail and say there's retail and everything else, or there's retail and 2 categories or 3 categories. We can specify this in all sorts of subtleties, but basically I'm here because office district just doesn't work in that zone. So I've come here to your board to ask for assistance. I thought the overlay zone was preferable because of the ability, once the specifics were established, for the Zoning Board of Appeals to say, well, maybe the parking lot should be on this side of the building, maybe it should be on the other side. It's not that the planning board doesn't have jurisdiction over that. But I proposed it not only for that, but because of the setbacks. Because the office district setbacks are substantial. And it would keep a more rural character to that road than the wall-to-wall facade of the village business, which has a 0 front yard setback and 0 side yard. But we have a Hampton Road office district, which has limitations on the size of buildings, as Eduardo said. And there's no reason why you couldn't have a North Sea Road retail district with its own setbacks and its own parking dichotomies, et cetera, et cetera. I see this, if that's done, and that's sort of analogous to the special exception zone, overlay zone, keeping the office district setbacks, if you tweak the setbacks, it's going to be a self-policing kind of circumstance up there. I do not see, Paul, the issue of the rental. I understand what the board has been doing for the last 8 years, and I held off on this in consultation with your former chairman because of this.
Right, I'm aware of that.
There's a retail problem on Main Street, and there's a community problem on Main Street and Job's Lane and Hampton Road. I don't see this issue as threatening what's going on Main Street for the following reasons. There are vacancies, a lot of them, not because the village has done something wrong or the planning commission did something wrong, is because landlords close out the tenants. I called personally the people that own the post office building, the former post office building. I could not get a straight answer out of the broker. He was unaware of how much of the building was retail versus how much had been the post office, which wasn't retail. He was unaware of the parking, the deficiency of the parking, Because if that whole building is retail, then they need 3 times the amount of spaces that are there now. So my point, and my position having talked to those people, is that that building is not vacant because anything the village is doing or the planning commission did or did not do. It's a landlord that doesn't seem to be very active or proactive in marketing their product. I don't want to speak in the wrong place here tonight,
Right.
because I don't have the facts, but I do know that there is a very popular restaurant in the Village Main Street that's now out of business, and that property has been sold. I can tell you for a fact that part of the septic rings encroach on the neighboring property. Also, that the building is not in good shape.
Right.
I don't know the specific number of the purchase price, but I can tell you that many reasonable people would not pay that kind of money to operate a restaurant. And the
Right.
sign that's in the window now does not say restaurant for rent, it says store for rent. And I've heard figures of the monthly requirement of that rent that are staggering, and that nobody could generate that kind of rent, plus taxes, plus insurance, before you start to pay your staff on a year-round basis and survive. So that may be vacant for a long time, not because there are not a lot of good people that want to use that store, but then we can simply afford the rents. And tenants have now figured out an equation with landlords whereby they can rent for what they want in the golden 3 months of the summer, and then shortly after Labor Day, they shut the whole store down because they can survive with the rent they pay for that period of time and to hold the store for the next year, but not to staff it. And if you walk down this village in Job's Lane now at 4:30, it's dark, and it looks like a tomb. And I don't think it's because of traffic, and I don't think it's because of anything else, but simply the fact that you have major national brand landlords coming in here, buying these properties, and simply dictating how the rents and occupancy will be, irregardless of what our village code says. That's my concern. That's my issue with the issues you've raised. As to traffic, so I don't think, and again, I'll address this in a moment, but in Waterston, I don't see the retail businesses, even if we developed a North Sea Road retail zone with setbacks that are going to compete with Main Street and Job's Lane and Hampton Road. These are walk-in clothing stores. I was going to do a survey today, but I just physically couldn't do it, about how many stores on those 3 streets are retail clothing. And people walk from one to the other. It's not like, again, I see North Sea Road as something like an Old Town Crossing. It would be a great place to have a facility like that, where it's a drive-in destination and there's retail there, but it's not really competing with the items here on Main Street. And by the way, we also have to address the fact that we've lost 5 retail spaces on Main Street to brokerage.
We did address that, by the way.
Well, I'd
But
like
can I
to
just,
again. Yeah.
sorry.
Thank you. No,
But-
I'm going to say, you
But
have.
just, we have, in fact, we went to the trouble and difficulty of saying that we would no longer permit
Yeah, I know.
office uses on the ground floor of
Right,
Main
right.
Street and Job's Lane. So over time, we think there will be significant change to those streets as those businesses inevitably change.
Well,
No one will be able to put an office back in. So we were very conscious of that. I'd also say, I appreciate, and you're right.
but let me
Yeah,
finish,
sorry.
please.
Yeah,
The traffic issue, we all know
Right.
of the issues that happened with the post office. I hope you all
Right,
do know that.
right.
They just simply dictated this. They did get it right as far as that goes, to say that the entrance to the post office should be opposite the one across the street.
Right.
They got that right. But as far as the traffic goes, I just don't understand those issues myself. If somebody said to me, there was a major grocery store, deli, salad bar business that wanted to come into Southampton, and it was looking for retail space, and you're the powers that be in Southampton Village, Bo, where would you put it? The last place I would say it should go is Hampton Road. In a building that is wall-to-wall property building, no parking, off-street parking whatsoever provided, and on a road that has parallel parking. And I ask anybody to challenge what I'm about to say, that when somebody is parallel parking on Hampton Road, they block the ongoing traffic, and the only way traffic can proceed around that car is to cross over the double yellow line, which is a traffic infraction. That doesn't exist on North Sea Road. There is a good flow. The road is adequately wide. I don't know why the recent Gibbs study is so discredited when it says itself that the traffic flow there is excellent. It's one of the 3 major arteries into the village. I agree with Eduardo, if you've ever looked at Hill Street, it's a nightmare. It's backed up all the way to Tuckahoe Lane in the summer.
Right.
Because their people are turning. Well, they're going to have to turn someplace, and they turn at Windmill Lane. North Sea Road between Bowden Square and the Gulf Station has only one traffic light. So all I'm saying is that a place like that's happening on Hampton Road could have been much better off in a place that took that traffic away from the Hampton Road Center. Traffic is not all a bad thing, in my opinion. When you have a full parking lot, it means that somebody's doing something right if you're selling items. And there were days where I saw that medical building across from Schmitz where people were parking on the lawn because the parking lot was full. There's still a sign there that has 8 doctors listed. So necessarily by saying this is office district, are you inhibiting traffic? No. Nobody thought of ATMs in banks when the bank zone was created, and ATMs created a lot of traffic. They don't anymore because they're so prolific. So all I'm saying is that I think the traffic flow is adequate there. If I could amend this application, I would, to say, please recommend to the trustees. I know, Eduardo, you had a little bit different. I think that Hampton Road should have another 10 feet of width between Bowden Square and Prospect Street. There are 4 lanes of traffic under the bridge. But if you had 4 lanes between Prospect Street and Bowden Square, there'd be enough for a straight turning lane and a right turning lane in both directions. Crossing the road would be almost prohibitive, but at least the traffic would flow, and then once it gets to Bowden Square, it goes at least primarily 2 different directions, if not 3. So it dissipates that kind of energy. And then north of the bridge, those islands were put in, but they could be taken out. I just don't see where there's that much land, if there are setbacks imposed, that the free enterprise market isn't going to settle itself out with what goes there. I think Eduardo's right. There's just not that many parcels left. If you take the post office, Schmidt, and Lynch, that's virtually that's more than one side of the entire street.
Mhm.
There are 3 houses north of Sanford Place, one's for sale. There's my lot, and the old medical building, and that's it. So I don't see where this challenges Main Street, and the only thing I see going on with Main Street, members of the board, is that every time the village does something to increase productivity in the village, the rents go up. I'd love to work with you on this. I appreciate your efforts. It's not an easy situation, but I think there is a solution. The bottom line for me is North Sea Road doesn't work. That problem is not going to go away, and I'm asking your assistance from the board, along with the 10 other people that had actively supported this, to try and help us do something about that.
And I think we all agree North Sea Road doesn't work. So I think that's the easy part here. We all agree something needs to change.
Yeah, but I like the suggestion of if the village could get a consultant.
Yeah, I think we need to get a
Work
consultant
with
to
us
look at it.
all to try and do something and have some input.
Right. I just want to be very clear, because you were very careful what you said, and I want to be very careful what I said. I never raised an issue of competing with Main Street or Jobs Lane. I raised the issue of competing with Nugent Street and Windmill Lane. So I want to be very clear. I agree with you. It's very straightforward. You're not going to compete with Main Street and Jobs Lane. The question I can't resolve, and maybe we need a planner for, is it seems to me directly competitive with Nugent Street and Windmill Lane, and physically similar. So the existing buildings, which hopefully will change over time on those streets, are actually the same type of buildings. They're buildings set back, large, single-user retail buildings, basically. And that's my concern. It's not about Main Street and Jobs Lane. But what it is about is, one of the things we said in the Village Center Master Plan is creating additional retail on those streets would create alternatives for the shops on Main Street. So it is something, so that's why I think we need a planner to look at it. The other thing I would say is, I am not certain, and again, it's why I think a planner should look at it, that continuing the suburban model of retail development is the right thing on North Sea Road. So we have now what is a classic, Long Island zoning of retail buildings set back with big individual parking lots. And whether or not that's right in the future or not, I know of no village, let me put it on Long Island, that's continuing to think that's the right type of zoning. So I'd want to take a look at that, because I think what we were trying to do in the village center was to say in the future, people are going to walk, people are going to use bikes, the model we've used doesn't work, and we need to change that. So, if you look at the other villages that have changed their zoning code, they're basically all doing the same thing, is changing that. Now, so that going forward, that's why I don't think any special exception zone works, because I'm not sure if that were a retail zone, that you'd want it to work as if this were a suburban shopping street. You may or may not, and that's what we need a plan to look at.
Paul,
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Right.
And if I thought I could have come in here and proposed that, I would have.
Right. I know you were trying to do it in a more simple way.
I tried to propose the least
Right, which I
complicated thing
appreciate.
that there was.
Right.
If you go to that level, I would say, please, let's revise the entire zoning code.
Right. Well, as we learned on the village center, we don't have to.
If you had any idea of
Right.
how difficult our the historic code is,
Right.
it would stagger you.
Right.
The only thing I can't wrap my head around, though, is, again, to call Nugent Street and Jagger Lane have their issues. But again, if landlords are going to be unreasonable in demands and rent, nobody is ever going to buy into those. And the only thing the village has done is enhance the bank account of the landlord.
I don't think that's the case.
Also, Nugent and Windmill, even in our business district master plan, we're looking at a 50-year range. Before those areas are actually redeveloped and changed and go the way we want it to go, there's major infrastructure and personal investment has to go into it.
Right.
So we're looking at a long-term process,
right.
whereas here
Absolutely.
we're looking at a short-term situation.
But short-term is
So we should not,
Right.
but we should not
Right.
push back the short term, waiting for the long-term process. I think we should address this now and fix it, and then the rest has got time, it'll fix itself along the way.
I do think, though, you keep putting your finger on an issue that is a core issue, which is, and I understand every point you make about the issues with the location Cinderella chose. For retailers in the village, it's the best thing that's happened in 20 years. There is no doubt, we will both be sitting here next June and we'll be talking about how much additional shopping that store created in the village. There's 0% doubt in my mind.
Paul,
It will have
I
an
don't-
impact in the village you have not seen in decades.
I don't
Because
disagree.
people have daily shopping. And so, again, my concern is if Cinderella had gone to North Sea Road, that would not have happened. And that's what I can't get past and what I'm having so much difficulty with. And maybe that goes to Eduardo's point of what type of retail then do we want to see on North Sea Road. So what do we do that doesn't stop what we worked so hard in so many years to create, which is bringing those anchors back downtown? So, if I had a choice, I would have stopped the post office from moving. Obviously, we couldn't do that. But the post office moving had tremendous impact on the village. There's no doubt. Retailers will tell you that all night and all day. It took
Paul, I
shoppers away.
don't disagree with
So
you.
that's, I think,
Yeah.
what we need to think about.
Okay, I don't disagree
Right,
with anything, but
right.
I think the free enterprise system needs to let itself work. But the issue with something
Right.
like Cinderella is, people are really saying, we planning board blocked in the shopping carts. Those delivery trucks, now that Pine Street has been
Right.
basically dead-ended,
Right,
those delivery trucks are gonna have to go back there. The neighbors on Cameron Street are upset.
right.
Not everybody is as happy as you might want to be about it. I'm not gonna say it's not gonna bring traffic
Right.
into the village, and
Right.
I said before, traffic indicates economic health.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Traffic on North Sea Road is not all bad.
Correct, absolutely
Okay?
correct.
All I'm
Right.
saying is
Right.
that, what's going on there now is there's no money in that street. There's not gonna be any, it's a wasted asset.
Right.
And if the Gibbs Group thinks that there can be 100,000 added square feet of retail space, unfortunately, they left the printing press before they told us where it's gonna be,
Right,
if it's not gonna be there. Again, though, with the rentals, again, if landlords continue to put pricing above where modest other shops can go,
Right.
this is gonna be a continuation. And I've been here now 66 years and seen this whole slide downward, and
Right.
it doesn't show much signs of abating.
Right.
Anchor tenants are great. Could there have been an anchor tenant, retail-wise, better than what's going in there now? I don't know. Go
Right, right,
look at some of the shopping centers in Paris. I
Right.
mean, they're marvelous.
right,
Their malls, their everything. The mall didn't work
Right.
because of the owner
right,
and the whole setup. But to see people carrying heavy groceries out of that building into the parking lot back here of Herrick's, I mean, and Herrick's or Hillis, that, I don't see that either, and we don't know where they're gonna park. That's the only, that will
right,
remain.
right,
Okay.
right, we'll see.
And then we go to
They'll
the
figure
fact
it
that we
out.
took the police
Right.
department off Main Street.
Right,
That took people away.
correct.
The post
correct,
office took
right,
people away.
Right,
And you know what happens now? Somebody proposes a 100,000 square foot shopping center in Tuckahoe, and everybody goes into high gear about you can't do that.
right,
So if we had to have another supermarket or a bigger supermarket in Southampton, where would it go? That's my question.
right.
Other
Okay,
than North Sea Road, there is no place.
okay,
So there's gotta be a little
Right.
suffering and a little
Right.
quid
Right.
pro quo with this whole project.
Right.
But again, I'm here because
right.
I've chosen to stand up and say
Right.
North Sea Road just can't continue the way
And we
it's going.
appreciate that, and I think we're all agreed it needs to change.
Thank you.
So I think we're gonna talk to the trustees about bringing
Yes,
in a
so that would be
planner to
good.
look at it,
Yep, thank you.
and then come up with a plan, and we'll work with you
Yeah,
and with
thank
the
you.
other owners
I appreciate that.
on that
help.
plan.
And
Right.
let's start with Rick too.
And we'll sit down with
With
Rick
Rick,
and start to
yeah.
talk about, you know, the
Zoning.
various zoning options here. I think our sort of sense is, if we're gonna really do something here, let's do
I would welcome
something.
it. For the
more
village,
comprehensive
I'm
rather
here for
than
the
just
village,
a-
not just for
a
myself.
Band-Aid.
This isn't
Right.
working,
And we
and
appreciate
it's
that.
terrible.
Right,
And you got a lot of people that want to expand and want
Right.
to do things on that road.
Right.
That can't.
yep. Any other,
And that's a waste.
it is a waste, it is a waste, there's no
I mean,
doubt.
you go in
Right.
days in May and
Right.
they're parking on Prospect Street to get into Lynch's.
Right.
He'd love more parking. He's
Right.
got the space for it.
Right.
But he can't do it.
Right, and you know, some of the things we've looked at in the village center, like shared parking, I think is, if we're gonna
Shared parking,
allow
shared
uses there, we're
easements,
gonna wanna look at
absolutely,
those things.
absolutely. That is very critical if that could
Right.
be.
Right.
And I've said, maybe
Right.
if you had that situation,
Right.
that you could get the
Right.
access to the Schmitz building and the one that would be
Right.
south off of
Right,
North Main Street and
Right.
shunt it onto Bowden Square.
right, right,
Because I think, well, there's one house now west of, or east of the restaurant, but
Right.
I think on the north side, they're all office buildings and a parking lot.
right,
Right.
right, right.
So to put
Just
an
getting
access,
redone, I guess.
put an access to that
Right.
parking in there would not hurt that at all.
Right,
Thank you very much.
okay, thanks.
All right,
Anybody? Okay, so, just want to announce, I think we're gonna move our meeting in January to a different date. We'll send out a notice because it's right now scheduled for January 2nd, which seems cruel and unusual
Right.
punishment
I don't
to
want
us.
to talk and run.
Um,
Christmas.
So, and I think on the January agenda, in addition to these items, we want to talk about where we are on the potential sewer district.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have a date for the?
We're trying, I'm working with Steve on a date.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure, just was
Yes,
time that we
yes,
tackle that.
Right.
Okay?
Okay, very good.